Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Lavin from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's session of the Local Infrastructure Hub, which we developed in collaboration with our partners at Results for America and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, welcome. The Local Infrastructure Hub was built to help cities prepare ambitious applications for federal funding. And throughout that time, we've also been supporting cities who've won federal funding in the past be able to put their projects into motion. With the next Safe Streets and Roads for All notice of funding opportunity expected by the end of March, that's really required by the end of March, now is a critical moment for cities to act. Today's session is going to be focused on how Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grants can be used to develop data-driven, community-centered safety action plans. And I want to be clear, the pot of available funding for planning grants is quite large. If you have not yet received a Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant, I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. We've been told if you kind of meet all those statutory requirements in your application, the chances of you getting funded are very, very good. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I have a quick request. As a member of the Hub community, your perspective matters. We funded this work to help cities really be able to take advantage of this moment where there was historic federal funding, but not capacity development in cities to be able to take advantage of that. We want to know what resonated with you, what did we do that helped you? What did we do that wasn't so helpful? What could we have done more of so that when there continue to be opportunities to help cities, we know where to guide our efforts. So we'd really appreciate your responses here to this survey. You don't have to do it during today's session, but pay attention. But please, don't forget. I know I'm the person who opens tabs and then doesn't return to them. Don't let that happen to you today. Please take just a few minutes to fill it out. And letting us know what didn't work as well is just as helpful as letting us know what did. So without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our featured speaker, Tiffany Smith, who's a program manager at the Vision Zero Network. Tiffany's here to share an overview of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, along with key insights and best practices to submit your application. So I'm going to pass it over to Tiffany. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for offering us your counsel today. We're really looking forward to your presentation. And as I said, for those of you joining late, please share your questions in the chat. As Tiffany's speaking, I'm going to be collecting all of them and then making sure we answer those before we end today's session, if we can. Otherwise, we'll follow up with you. So over to you, Tiffany.
Thanks so much, Jamie, for the lovely introduction. And also just want to extend a big thanks to Local Infrastructure Hub for inviting me today to speak. Really excited to kind of dig into this Safe Streets and Roads for All grants program. And so, yeah, next slide. Just for folks who aren't super familiar with our organization, Vision Zero Network, we are a national nonprofit that helps communities, practitioners, advocates, and more sort of advance their goals of Vision Zero, which is a strategy to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on our roadways while increasing sort of safe and accessible mobility for all road users. And we host a multitude of learning opportunities and webinars. And also partner with various organizations. So really excited to be here. Next slide, please. And one of the webinars we'll be hosting upcoming on March 13th, this Thursday, will be sort of showcasing how local leaders across the country are kind of putting some proven safety strategies into action, from like reducing speed limits, installing traffic calming features, cross-agency collaboration, and more. So if you're looking for some potential small-scale projects to test out in your community or sort of like leverage for SS4A funding, also encourage you to check that out as well for additional inspiration, and we hope you'll join us. Next slide. And so with that, sort of jumping into why we're all here, Safe Streets and Roads for All, or SS4A as we refer to it, is essentially a federal funding program to support local communities, tribes, municipalities, and territories to prevent roadway fatalities and serious injuries, and sort of advance the nation's goal of roadway safety. And so the program allocates $5 billion over 5 years for safety planning, demonstration, and implementation grants at the local, regional, and tribal levels. It's really a great opportunity to invest in really more innovative and upstream safety changes that can be used to kind of make sustainable and long-term progress on improving roadway safety outcomes. Next slide. And so this is particularly critical given our nation's roadway safety crisis in 2024. More than 44,000 people lost their lives on our roadways. And in recent years, we're seeing the proportion of people moving outside of vehicles sort of experience a higher burden of traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And this is also compounded in lower income communities. Next slide. And so on top of that, we also see that the US has the highest pedestrian death rate among 27 high income nations. And so we know that improving roadway safety is possible. We have the strategies to do that. Next slide. And so we're seeing various improvements on the ground. Various communities are shifting and scaling some of these things like road diets, traffic circles, speed humps, signal timing, and more. All of which you can also either apply for sort of planning funding or supplemental funding to test out, which we'll talk about in a bit. Implementation funding. So really encourage you, again, if you're looking for more inspiration, check that out. Next slide. And so with that, as I mentioned, SS4A is really a great source of funds to plan, pilot, or replicate some of these changes that I've touched on earlier. To date, more than 2,000 communities in all 50 states and Puerto Rico have received SS4A grants. That equates to about $2.8 billion in funding, and almost 50% have been awarded actually to communities in rural areas. So if you're a small community, if you're a rural community, please don't be discouraged about applying. You actually have a really great shot. And so together, these funds have targeted more than 70% of the nation's population. Next slide. And so the SS4A grant program sort of has two types of funding, or you could say maybe two and a half types of funding, depending on how you look at it. Planning and demonstration grants. Essentially, planning grants provide funding to develop a comprehensive safety action plan, as well as supplemental planning or demonstration grants. Supplemental planning essentially is used to kind of build off of a safety action plan, something that perhaps you couldn't dig quite into in your base plan, but want to explore further, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. As well as demonstration grants, which are really funding to either inform a plan's development with tests or pilots or innovative strategies, or to also, for some communities, maybe some of these changes are new, there might be some pushback. So it's also a chance to test things out with your community, get their feedback as well, which can then feed into your planning processes. And then the second type of grant funding is implementation grants, which essentially supports the construction of projects or interventions that are specifically outlined or called out in your action plan and in your safety action plan. Next slide, please. And so looking a little bit closer at planning and demonstration grant funding, as I mentioned, planning grants essentially provide funding to support the development and completion of a safety action plan. And so when it comes to developing a safety action plan, I really want to encourage you not to think of this as just another plan. This if funding is an opportunity to kind of really lock in and scale up a different way of approaching roadway safety work. So perhaps like sort of pivoting your community to a more safe system, sort of upstream and preventative based approach to roadway safety, to improve a walk, bike, scooter, or transit trips, using a sort of holistic and data-informed approach to prioritize where interventions for your safety projects, and also sort of a way to kind of reallocate funds to be kind of targeting the most fatal and serious crashes and injuries. And then if we look specifically at supplemental planning. This is essentially funding to enhance an existing safety plan or one that's in development. So let's say you have a safety action plan, but need to kind of flesh out a more comprehensive approach for like safe routes to schools, or you need to kind of build out your network so that it's more ADA compliant. Supplemental safety planning is a great uh, source of funds you can use or leverage to kind of build off of the kind of base plan that you've put together, or even something more robust like a speed management plan. We know that speed is a critical factor in deaths and severe injuries. So we have seen communities as well leverage SS4A funding for that. And then demonstration grants, as I mentioned earlier, are funding to kind of inform a plan's development via pilots or tests. And these are really great opportunities to kind of explore your bolder, more innovative ideas. As I mentioned earlier, let's say you have a high injury network, you know where the majority of deaths and severe injuries are occurring, but you're looking for ways to kind of scale projects, move from like a scale projects more efficiently and quickly. And so you can leverage like demonstration funding to pilot some quick builds to test things out faster and quicker so that once you have the information and necessary data that allows you to kind of eventually move towards more permanent solution or installation or intervention as well. And so now just going to take a little bit closer look at each of these grant types. Next slide. Um, so just some examples of safety action plans that have sort of like key components that we see, like leadership commitment and sort of goal setting, a planning structure, a robust safety analysis, as well as a process for engagement and collaboration, and including, as I mentioned earlier, a strategy for project selection, Charlotte's Vision Zero plan or Safe Streets plan, Salisbury, Maryland's plan. They have a really strong focus on speed management in their plan, and as well as Harrisburg Metropolitan Planning Organization's safety action plan. So if you're working within a regional space, definitely recommend you check that out, as well as the examples of some other funded SS4A action plans in the link shared chat. Thanks so much. Next slide. Um, and so as I shared earlier, supplemental planning is really meant to kind of build off of the safety action plan. It's really a chance to delve deeper on a specific element or aspect of your planning. And so this can be through like road safety audits, this can be through progress reporting, or even how you engage key stakeholders. Maybe that's a community engagement or roadway safety community engagement supplemental plan, or a safe routes to school plan, as I shared earlier, or even lighting plans. Really is a chance to kind of build off of the kind of core elements outlined in a plan. You might know where the majority of deaths of severe injuries are, but how can we also improve upon that, or increase or sort of tackle a very specific challenge unique to your jurisdiction or community. Next slide. And so just quickly, just sharing some
Hello.
example from
Um,
example. Oh,
concern, question, feedback about inter.
oh. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Just wanted to share some examples from this past year's awardees. The city of Everett received $1 million to develop an active transportation plan and to pilot ITS. It stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems, and are essentially technologies to improve transportation safety and operations through like data and sensors and communications. And so you'll see a range of different types of supplemental safety planning, ADA transition plan, as well as like a corridor wide speed management study. So really encourage you to think about what unique safety challenge showing up in your data or in your community context, and sort of think about how you might want to use supplemental safety planning for that. Next slide, please. Demonstration activities. As I mentioned earlier, really great opportunities to pilot and test things out, whether that's through quick build strategies, like maybe using low cost temporary materials to test out different interventions, can be to pilot operational activities, like maybe changes to EMS crash responses, or to develop a or pilot a post-crash kind of response team that goes out after a fatal or serious crash and kind of decides next steps or interventions, or to test out more innovative technologies. So you could apply for demonstration funding to pilot like telematics and in your jurisdiction to assess like hard braking and where speeding events are occurring and sort of plan your interventions there. Or even we've seen some communities explore the possibility of piloting a ride share program after tailgating events to minimize impaired driving. So think of demonstration activities as really this is your opportunity to kind of test out kind of more out of the box ideas. Next slide. And so just wanted to quickly share some examples from Rama Navajo chapter and Baton Rouge Metropolitan Planning Organization. You'll see the Rama Navajo chapter received 7.6 million in funding to develop a safe routes to school plan. So they're assessing walking, biking, and bus routes and are identifying countermeasures. And another project in Baton Rouge, they received 1 million to pilot crosswalks and pedestrian islands and roadway reconfigurations on speeds and safety outcomes. Next slide. And then, of course, implementation grants, but some things you'll want to consider is that applicants must have an existing action plan, and your projects have to be explicitly called out in your safety action plan, and they basically have to be shovel ready. Also, one thing I want to note is, implementation funding is oversubscribed. It often is. So it's super competitive. And so I heard someone mention it earlier, but I really want to encourage you, if you can, to really go for planning and demonstration. You can bundle as many activities together. You can test things out as well. Your chances of receiving it are much higher. So that would be my recommendation to try that, or to go for planning and demonstration if that's an option for you. Next slide. And so again, just sharing another example, 7.6 million in funding to kind of scale some low cost, high impact safety upgrades from corridor intersection lighting, edge lines, leading pedestrian intervals or pedestrian head starts, depending on how you call them, and protective left turn phasing. So a range of projects. Next slide. And so just as I kind of come to the end of my presentation, I just want to uplift some key changes between the last SS4A 2025 round and previous rounds. So that said, I just want to preface that and say that requirements for the upcoming cycle are still to be determined. The NOFO is not out yet, so this could all change in a matter of weeks. But just some things to kind of keep in mind is that supplemental planning and demonstration activities are, again, eligible if you have an approved action plan or are actively developing one with SS4A funds. Also emphasis on serving underserved communities is now sort of framed as areas of persistent poverty. And so you want to think about how to integrate like a safety analysis or a needs assessment of these areas of persistent poverty and highlight this in your application. So this might mean assessing things like high risk road features, the specific safety needs of specific types of road users, the built environment, and analyzing how those might show up in those areas of persistent poverty. And then also one new thing that came up last year was projects reducing lane capacity or access might like sort of not be viewed as favorably. At first glance, it might seem counterintuitive, but just want to offer a reminder that safety and access are not necessarily in conflict with each other and can be complementary. So, for instance, converting roads to fewer travel lanes and adding center turn lanes can actually, in some cases or in many cases, increase access for emergency vehicles as drivers can more easily pull over, allowing first responders to navigate the corridor without delay. So just emphasis, like if you're interested in sort of narrowing lane projects, you want to be mindful of that in your framing and in your narrative of your application. And we anticipate the call for projects to come out by the end of this month. With a due date between sort of 60 to 90 days. So be ready for a fast turnaround. And so I just want to recommend you sign up for alerts on USDOT's official SS4A page for up-to-date info and most timely info. Next slide. We can skip to the next slide because I kind of talked about this already. And so just some kind of final tips I want to emphasize is, again, really encourage you to bundle projects so that they kind of each address different parts of the safe system approach: safe streets, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe people, post-crash response. Those projects really tend to do well. So, sort of thinking about how you can bundle your projects together to tackle each of these items in your application. So, for instance, maybe you're doing a safety audit and piloting ISA in your fleet vehicles and also applying for funding for Safe Routes to School supplemental planning funding. Layering those projects is going to be more favorable. And if anything, it also gives you more chances to get funding. If for some reason one project doesn't get accepted, you still have others. You're not penalized for submitting more projects. Next slide. And then again, small and rural communities should definitely apply. As I mentioned earlier, almost 50% of awarded communities are in rural areas. And even if you have low fatality rates, that's also okay. You're still eligible to apply, even if your fatality rate falls below the 17.5 fatality rate thresholds. Next slide. And again, you'll also want to emphasize the safety and economic and familial benefits of your roadway safety work. So how do these projects benefit families and children? Essentially, if there's a way to link to job access, delivery reliability, or workforce stability, or sort of the economic benefits, or even how this kind of boosts response for emergency responders or first responders, or even how safer streets can reduce government burden and cost. That's all really helpful framing as well for your application. And then next slide. Finally, just want to emphasize, again, this is really a chance to try new and innovative things out. And innovative doesn't necessarily mean super technical. It can also mean just new to your jurisdiction or new to your community. Next slide. And then we also have a resource where we share different winning projects and examples. We'll also be updating that in the coming weeks as well. But definitely check it out as well for additional insights and inspiration. And with that, I'll move to my final slide. We'll also be sharing, Vision Zero Network will be kind of sharing real-time info on the SS4A grant cycle. So definitely recommend you subscribe to our emails if you have more. So want to stay up to date. Thanks so much. Looking forward to your questions.
Well, that was just fantastic, Tiffany. Every question I was writing down, you wound up covering. I'm going to circle back to something, though, that came up in the chat. You addressed it, but I think it's an area that cities are struggling with a bunch, which is that the new criteria does de-emphasize, restrictions to lanes or things that would impede vehicle access. I know you talked about how do we reframe whether a lane restriction really does cut access. And I'd love to just, if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think for cities that maybe had a SS4A application that they wanted to dust off and resubmit, that's maybe one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, some key things I would probably just avoid are maybe using words like road diets or reducing travel flow or reducing vehicle throughput. But I would emphasize if there's sort of, depending on the project, obviously, it depends, but if there are ways to sort of showcase how your street redesign or lane reconfiguration does not actually sort of reduce overall capacity or improves capacity for first responders, I think that's really the kind of key framing. Or and also like if to really emphasize the safety benefits first and foremost. Like, is this project on your high injury network? Who's overrepresented in deaths and severe injuries in this roadway? Is it families or children or young people? Is it near a school? Sort of thinking about the context as well of like where you are attempting or where you are interested in reducing the lane capacity as well also matters because there is an explicit focus on the safety of children and families. And so if you can sort of tie that together in your application, I think that is also helpful framing. And again, yeah, I would just emphasize if there's a way to kind of show safety improvement while also emphasizing that the proposal is not necessarily anticipated or shown to necessarily reduce vehicle capacity. I think like striking that balance will be critical. I recognize it's a hard question and folks are
Yeah,
struggling with it, but yeah.
it is. And I'm just wondering, is there a role for demonstration projects to play in sort of testing the case around that, right? Whether, I kind of always give as an example, a somewhat dated one, but when New York City, when Mike Bloomberg was mayor, was thinking about pedestrianizing Times Square, and people were losing their minds about what that would mean to traffic. There was, a demonstration project done, and it turned out traffic moved faster. Is there a role for demonstration projects here to talk about the access piece?
I definitely think so, especially if you're framing it as like, we are interested in exploring this potential project, or even if there's like strong community support for a specific project. But there's maybe perhaps you can also frame it as like, there's interest in this project. We know that it is, reducing lanes here it will improve safety, but we are also interested in testing out whether this also improves or sort of limits vehicle accessibility. You can totally frame it as planning and demonstration grants. And one thing I forgot to mention to your previous question, I think also community support is a key aspect of this framing as well. So if there is strong community like buy-in for specific projects, I would definitely mention that and emphasize that in your framing as well.
I have more questions on that. I'm going to hold
Yeah.
them because we have a mayor panel, and I'm going to guess they're going to touch on it. So I don't want to steal
Yeah.
anyone's thunder. But we have some technical questions I'm going to address to you.
Okay.
One is there a local match requirement?
Yes, I believe, yes, there is. Yes.
Okay. So everyone, the application's coming out in the next 13 days. Work on lining up your match, or thinking creatively about the in-kind piece. And then another question is, we've received Safe Streets and All grant to do engineering. Do you know if there is funding for the construction, and what is the match percentage? Okay, if you don't,
Um, yeah,
we
I'm
can
not sure
research and
about the
answer it.
percentage. Well, can you repeat the question? Sorry, the first
Sorry.
part of the
We have
question.
received the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant to do engineering. Do you know if there is funding for the construction? I can answer that part, much less. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then what is the match percentage?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure
Yeah,
about the match percentage, but I can look and
yeah, we can
follow
circle
up.
back and
Yeah.
answer that. Great. Well, we have a star-studded mayor panel that we want to get to, and then we can circle back for questions. So do keep putting your questions in the chat. I promise we'll get to them all today. And if there's anything we need to do a little digging on our end, we'll follow up with you for a response. So I want to introduce two mayors who have won Safe Streets and Roads for All grants. We have Mayor Eddie Melton of Gary, Indiana, and Mayor Lily Wu of Wichita, Kansas, joining us today. Thank you, mayors, so much. I'm going to pass it over to Tiffany to moderate an incredible panel, and then we will get to some Q&A after. So we'll bring those mayors, just getting some spotlights on, and we'll get you all looking at each other. Great.
Just waiting for Mayor Melton, I believe.
All right. Mayor Melton, I think we need you to turn your camera on to be able to to spotlight you. Great. Well, thank you, Mayor Wu, for joining. Maybe we'll get started as we work on some technical issues.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for joining, Mayor Wu. Before we jump into our discussion, it would be great if you could briefly share a bit about yourself and a bit about your SS4A project.
Well, thank you very much, Tiffany, and thank you, Jamie, for hosting this session this afternoon. I'm actually joined by City Engineer Paul Gunzelman, who's truly the expert at this. I'm so grateful to him because it is with his department, Public Works and Utilities, that this actually even became an idea for the city of Wichita. A little bit about myself. My name is Lily Wu. I serve as the mayor of the city of Wichita. It is the largest city in the state of Kansas with roughly 400,000 people. Our community is one that is truly interconnected with the region, and that is why we are part of what we call WAMPO, the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. So that regional aspect really, I believe, helped us with this application. For us, the thing that helped, again, with this opportunity was leveraging the regional approach as well as just the expertise coming from the City of Wichita's Public Works and Utilities Department. So when it comes to leveraging, we were fortunate enough to apply for this grant back in June of 2025. The council voted unanimously to go ahead and put in an application. And I can tell you from the council point of view, there are 6 council members who represent 6 districts in our city. And 3 of those 6 districts are affected by this very grant. And the unanimous decision also came because of leveraging dollars. The ask was for $20 million in federal funding with a $5 million local match. The state of Kansas has something called the Build Kansas Fund program, which would provide $4.75 million towards the implementation of this program. And the city of Wichita's portion was $250,000. So you can just see the leveraging of these dollars truly was the reason why all 7 of us said unanimously we want to apply. And then right around the Christmas time, December of 2025, we were notified of receiving this grant. So we are very grateful to our federal partners. We really work very closely with our federal representatives. And as a matter of fact, right now, the majority of the council is in Washington, D.C., advocating for our federal agenda. And our agenda is always focused on things that are infrastructure, things that truly make a big difference, not just for the citizens of Wichita, but that collaborative regional approach. And that is, I believe, the reason why we received this grant, because it's 7 miles of Broadway here in Wichita that connects Derby and Hayesville all the way to another community that also appreciates this, which is Park City. And so again, the regional approach as well as the leveraging of dollars, I think helped us. And again, I'm very grateful to Paul and his team for getting us to this point.
Thanks so much, Mayor Wu. And I think your point about sort of the leveraging the regional sort of collaboration is really critical. Like road safety doesn't happen in a vacuum. People travel to and from. So it's really kind of great to hear about this collaboration and also the immense amount of funding that you all received. Now I'm going to pivot to Mayor Melton. Would love it if you could briefly share a little bit about yourself and a bit about your community's SS4A project.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right, perfect. Sorry about my technical issues in the beginning.
No worries.
Technology always fails you right at the moment when you need it.
Yes,
So
always.
I had to shift from one device to the next. So anyway, my name is Eddie Melton, mayor of the great city of Gary, Indiana. It's truly an honor to be a part of this discussion with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. So, Jamie, your team, it's an honor to see you guys again. Local Infrastructure Hub has been a huge access uh, to the city of Gary and just the collaboration and partnerships among these entities. I'm in the midst of my first term, and right now, I'm in my third year of my first term. And collaboration has been extremely key, not just from a philanthropic perspective, but both state and federal. If it wasn't for some of the relationships and the networking that I established with some of my friends through our, either through Bloomberg, other cohort mayors, it helped me progress further in some of these strategies, such as applying for grants. And just like Ms. Wu just mentioned, going to lobby and advocate congressionally to leaders on a federal level. So, just really quick, our journey started with a $140,000 SS4A grant. And I'm just going to kind of give you some statistics. I was previously a state senator representing Gary in Northwest Indiana, our entire region. And one of the last pieces of legislation that I passed was called Senate Bill 434, which provided state matching funding for our transit development district, which was in our downtown city of Gary. And we're going to be building a brand new transit station. Our South Shore line, right now, 10 years ago, it would have taken you an hour to get from downtown Gary to downtown Millennial Park in Chicago. The state of Indiana has invested in that infrastructure, and right now it takes you 30 minutes to get to downtown Chicago from downtown Gary. And we're seeing a growth in our population because of our assets in transit, and which means that in key corridor areas like downtown, we have to be very mindful and intentional on future development. One of the things that has been a lingering issue for decades is, just like many of you on this call, state highways going through main areas where the community is trying to gather. So it's hard to convince the public it's safe, it's okay to come downtown Gary when you got semi trucks barreling down uh, Fourth Avenue, Fifth Avenue at 50 miles an hour, right? Because also we share an entry point with US Steel, one of the largest steel manufacturers in the United States. So it was a very complex situation, but this planning grant really helped us. I wanted to share some of the data. The baseline data for Gary was sober when we did the study. Between 2018 and 2022, Gary's experienced over 14,000 crashes, resulting in 2,100 serious injuries. Now, let me put that in context in terms of citywide. Gary is 52 square miles, and I
Mm.
know some other cities with larger populations and larger and probably equal footprint. But Gary, technically, based off the census, say we have 70,000 people. So we have a huge footprint with a smaller population of folk. I see that as an opportunity of growth and development. But this is the time for us to fix these type of issues as we re-envision the communities. And Tiffany, I want to thank you for sharing some of that verbiage and language that we may want to stay away from, like road diets and things like that. That was a good nod from my team that I'm gonna make them watch this later on to,
Yeah.
to let them know stay away from that language right there, because that's what we are used to hearing when the
Hmm.
engineers sit down with our Indiana Department of Transportation. But the good thing is, on a state level, this is a problem they want to solve as well. So that's very good. So here's some of the things that we did on our action plan. Revealed that our most severe high injury corridors are primarily Fourth Avenue, Fifth Avenue, and Broadway. All of that intersects into our downtown. Three highways
Mm.
are in our downtown, and semi trucks currently have access to all of those highways. So I believe we built a winning, actionable application. We had to be very intentional and very strategic, and we pivoted to looking for more federal support, just like many of you on this call. And the request is to focus on to more moderate injury corridors. So this corridor entry that I'm talking about now, in addition to it being a highway, also is an exit and entry point
I see.
for I-90, which is an expressway to get you to uh, Chicago or Detroit. If you've driven through on I-90, you'll know, if you're going to South Bend or Notre Dame and things of that nature, it's right in here. So meanwhile, our local efforts are already shifting that baseline through aggressive, proactive approaches, right? Engaging our public safety officials, police, and helping to monitor and start to shift trends and shift behaviors in the public to let them know that we're being more mindful and we're shifting the culture to make downtown a more livable, walkable destination. Because we have the infrastructure and the access, we want to make sure folks know with this new train station, there's going to be new development. There's going to be more residential options and opportunities. There's going to be more daycare and other retail opportunities. So now we're starting to train the public on that accessibility. With that training process, we've seen a decrease 33% of some of those incidents within this corridor area. And that was just in 2025. So I wanted to share
Oh,
that piece
wow.
of it. Uh,
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. So our city control interventions, in addition to receiving $421,600 in SS4 demonstration grant to deploy immediate tangible interventions. So that's something that we're extremely proud of, building, this might not be the right term, Tiffany, but traffic calming
Yeah,
uh,
that is
of,
the right term.
of practices, and speed our feedback and sign implementation, and changing some of the signage and corridors just to make it more effective for folks. And I'll throw this last piece in here. And I think telling your story as a community is extremely important. Telling it through data, telling it through the narratives of local community stakeholders is very critical and important. We're right now telling our story of what's skin in the game. Now, some former legislators on here and former other state and federal officials may be familiar with the terminology. What local skin in the game are you putting into these projects? And we're able to tell that story uh, in our infrastructure overall. Um, Really quick, when I came in office at 2024, 2,000 streetlights the city owned. We assessed our streetlights, and I would say out of those 2,000 that we own outside of our utility company, 900 were broken. So we literally, within a year, upgraded to energy efficient LED streetlights throughout the entire city. And that alone had changed the mindset, the culture, and the perspective of people, letting them know that progress is being taken place. But also, it let our state and federal partners know that we're making the investments in our own infrastructures with that. And that costs $3.5 million. Right now, we're shifting that cost savings into fixing traffic signals. There are a significant amount of traffic signals that were out throughout the entire city. And right now, we're either, based off our traffic studies, we're either replacing them with active traffic signals, but because of that population loss over the last 50 years, some intersections don't warrant a traffic light. It may cause for a stop sign or illuminated traffic the stop sign, and we're replacing those. So just those changes is starting to change the narrative and the messaging on how we act and invest in infrastructure, which gains that confidence in the public, which also gains the support of state and federal officials. So, again, thank you all for your support in our efforts here in Gary.
Thanks so much, Mayor Melton. You mentioned a lot of really great things, and one of those I want to come back to, but one thing you mentioned is like an area where there's a majority of like where your dangerous roadways are. This is, something we see in a lot of different types of communities. There's a small set of roadways that account for 80 to 90% of deaths and severe injuries in a community. And so I wanted to pivot to you, Mayor Wu, again, to talk a little bit about Wichita's high injury network, as we like to call it. Was curious if you could speak a little bit about how your team or you were able to kind of identify which safety improvements to kind of target on which part of the high injury network, because I know you mentioned the 7 mile stretch. So I think the
So
audience might
Tiffany,
be a little.
let me paint the picture really
Yeah,
quick, and then let Paul kind of speak to those details.
sure.
So the Broadway corridor again is 7 miles. That includes a lot of our downtown investment that is truly going to be transformational for our city. $300 million biomedical campus is coming on board, and it actually sits at the heart of that 7 miles, and it is on Broadway. And so, because of that, we know that there will be an influx of individuals coming to our downtown core. However, the city of Wichita is a very car-centric community. This is a community that prides itself in short commute times. Almost anywhere around our city, you can access within a 20-minute drive. And so because of that, people expect Broadway to be that connector from north to south. However, Kellogg and Broadway is our highest accident area. And that is just south of this new biomedical campus. So because of all of these ingredients, again, this rose to the top for Public Works to make the decision that this should be the application. So I will let Paul kind of give you more on the injuries and why that corridor is so critical.
Thank you, Mayor. And Tiffany, you had brought it up, I think, earlier. Our WAMPO, as Mayor Wu mentioned before, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, had completed a comprehensive safety action plan in 2023 that we utilized as we filled out this grant application for Safe Streets for All. And as the mayor said, Kellogg and Broadway is the highest crash located. Both the Kellogg corridor as well as the Broadway corridor were identified within that comprehensive safety plan as being a heat map. So that was part of our decision. It's a heavy pedestrian and bicycle corridor that folks utilize to get to social services along the corridor, as well as either a block or two off of the corridor. So we do have some pedestrian related injuries as well. So those were factors that went into it. And as we move forward with the plan, we will look at, countermeasures identified by the Federal Highway Administration to look at, signalized crosswalks, ADA improvements, curb extensions at intersections to shorten the pedestrian travel way, et cetera, as we go through that. Also look at high intensity pavement markings. We've done some of those throughout the corridor based on requests from pedestrians to make them more visible as they cross roadway.
Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing that additional context. And yeah, it's great to hear all of these changes, these traffic calming. This is really exciting. I love to nerd out on this stuff, so I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing the fruits of those interventions. Mayor Melton, you mentioned, I appreciated your wording. You said like skin in the game. And so I sort of interpret that as like community buy-in, community support. I would love it if you could kind of share a little bit more about sort of, I mean, you could talk about this for a range of things, however you feel, but I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how the safety action plan sort of like helped prepare you for your planning and demonstration grants, because I know a component of that is like community involvement and engagement. But yeah, so would love to hear a little bit also more about that process and like sort of what that was like and sort of kind of building that skin in the game.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. We have another partner at the table, and that's Notre Dame University. We're part of their 100-mile partnership, which are some municipalities within 100 miles of Notre Dame. And they have helped us to redesign and rethink and replan our corridor that I'm speaking of. And through that process, we had a series of charrettes, small, not small, actually large sessions. So we have nearly 500 residents that participated in a series of conversations of how they envision our downtown corridor transforming. And a part of that was safety, right? So being able to leverage that community input into our planning process, into these documents was extremely important. Uh, when we talk about quick build, traffic calming, that's extremely important, especially around schools, prioritizing. There's a couple of schools in this area as well, speaking with them and the educators in that area, and implementing a pilot program with the new signage was something that we gained from that group as well too. So um, I would say the local skin in the game is not just financial resources or what we put of our local tax dollars or the revenue that we generate for infrastructure, but also the time and commitment of getting the public's feedback. That's extremely important for me, and I know it is for most mayors, that I'm able to share with the public that we're making decisions based off what we're hearing. Now, sometimes we have to make decisions that may not resonate with the public because they may not have all of the facts or the details, but that's where we have to tell our story.
Thanks so much. And yeah, I saw Mayor Wu, you were nodding your head. Not to put you on the spot, but wanted to give you a chance to also to respond to this question about like skin in the game, community involvement, since we know this is a key part of the SS4A, well, mostly planning grants, but yeah, I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add as well.
I was concurring with Mayor Eddie because that is exactly what we've been talking about. This is a community of, again, 400,000 people divided into 6 different districts. And each of the council members hosts their own district advisory board meetings each month. And oftentimes people don't know whom to connect with. And so I'm really trying my very best to remind people, which district do you live in? Do you know your council member? And providing that outlet for individuals, not just when we have a challenge that we need their feedback on, but a constant loop of feedback on a monthly basis by connecting with their council members. So gaining that trust from community is critical. And back to stakeholders, this corridor also touches multiple schools. And we are good partners with them. And we were just talking as a side note that in our application, we kind of take for granted these great collaborations we already have. We have monthly talks with the schools so that they are never blindsided. But we didn't even put it in the application, but they are a partner. So sometimes it's gaining that reminding ourselves that we are doing even those things that we sometimes forget to even put in an application because we don't necessarily want to pat ourselves in the back, but I can see why it's important to have all that information to help other cities as well see that they have these collaborations that are critical to gaining maybe that grant or even gaining support from community. So my encouragement was in nodding that yes, skin in the game is important, community buy-in and trust is important, but really empowering also the leaders that are closest to the communities to remind them that they can also help shape this improvement area. And so right now, we're still waiting on the federal government to give us that agreement, but we're still moving ahead. And part of that moving ahead is gaining trust from community by doing some listening sessions that will be forthcoming.
Yes.
And looking forward to that, because we are this grant for us is the implementation, but it will require a lot of community feedback and buy-in.
Thanks so much, Mayor Wu. I just have one sort of closing question. I don't know if you could share in brief 30 seconds or less, but I wanted to give you all a chance to share any sort of key lesson learned that you want to impart on folks tuning in to today's session. I guess I'll start with you, Mayor Melton, since Mayor Wu just left.
No problem. I would just say let your data tell your story, like I mentioned before. Let your community write the solutions. With that storytelling, with that community engagement piece, you will build an irrefutable proposal. And I think uh, formats like this is extremely helpful for mayors to bounce off ideas. Like, Mayor Wu, thank you. You just gave me some thoughts I need to take back to my team. So on the engaging our council as well, which sometimes we, I don't want to say forget, but it's easy to make them a layer of communication when how can I incorporate them in the process? So just thanks again for all of the advice that I'm hearing as well in this conversation.
Thanks so much. Mayor Wu, you want to share final lesson learned?
And thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Mayor Eddie. I'm so grateful to be sitting next to the actual expert. And I think that's my lesson. My lesson is that as mayors, we help craft a vision and tell the bigger picture story. But I don't have the expertise in engineering, and I will rely on the actual experts to really help shape that narrative. And it goes back to what you said about data. I may not be able to find that data, but I know whom to ask for that data. And so I think sometimes we forget that we actually have professionals that are the actual experts, and relying on them to help tell the story where we can work together to craft the application for the betterment of our community is the actual goal. And that it's not just the mayors, not the council, it's in collaboration with professional staff that we're able to have these successful grants. And so I'm just very grateful that Paul spent some of his time today in helping with this conversation, because I hope that this is helpful for other communities as you're applying for that grant, because I believe that our number one goal in all communities is safety. And for us in our community, safety in streets always rises to the top when we have community surveys. And so relying on those partners, whether it's police, fire, or public works, they are our partners in providing these safe communities.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for this lovely discussion. It was great to hear different perspectives, how you all have developed really strong applications. I'm really excited to see the sort of fruits of your projects. And I'll pass it on to Jamie to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you, Mayor Wu. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mayor Melton. Mayor Wu, thank you for remembering to uplift the people who do this work day in and day out, and are the real heroes and experts in cities. And so, Paul, thank you for joining us today. We're going to put one more plug in to please fill out our survey on the local infrastructure hub. As we said, the feedback you provide is just really important to us in helping to make sure that we are always delivering for you capacity building support that matters, and that assists you cities in doing this important work. Two things I wanted to just note. One is we had a tech and innovation series session last week that really reflected on what have we learned and what about how to bring emerging technologies into cities, how to be innovative in your projects. If you didn't get to check that out, please look in the chat. We're sharing the recording and the summary of that session, so you can listen to it on your commute home or check it out when you have a moment. And then finally, we have our upcoming, the last session of the local infrastructure hub is going to be on March 31st. We'll plot all the stops and think about from grants to infrastructure systems, what are the ways to sustain this investment? And so we'll be covering what cities must carry forward to not only continue pursuing federal infrastructure funding, but to implement and sustain those investments successfully for your community. So please do join us. We'll be sharing more info and specifics on that. But I can't say enough. Thank you to all the cities who've been joining us for the last 4 years to really be able to transform this funding into real change on the ground. So with that, I'm going to let you all go. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone and have a great week.